28, 22 through 23, and 2 Chronicles chapter 20, 1 through 4. So 2 Chronicles chapter 28, 22 and 23, those verses, and 2 Chronicles chapter 21 through 4. Our Pastor Brendan Glass, and his lovely wife, Elder Yvonne, Doctor, all types of 3 letters after her name. She's just so great. But they are at Pastor's home church, the church that raised him. He is preaching there. So we are praying for him, and I am definitely honored to be able to speak to you while he is absent. So let's go ahead and get into this. So we have 2 Chronicles 28. That's where we're starting. Verses 22 and 23. It says, "Now in the time of his distress, this same King Ahaz became yet more unfaithful to the Lord, for he sacrificed to the gods of Damascus, which had defeated him, and said, because the gods of the kings of Aram helped them, I will sacrifice to them that they may help me. But they became the downfall of him and all Israel." Now we move to 2 Chronicles 20, 1 through 4.
Now you gotta keep it on your mouth.
2 Chronicles chapter 20. And it says, "Now it came about after this, that the sons of Moab and the sons of Ammon, together with some of the Meunites, came to make war against Jehoshaphat. Then some came and reported to Jehoshaphat, saying, a great multitude is coming against you from beyond the sea out of Aram. And behold, they are in Hazazon Tamar, that is in Gedi. Jehoshaphat was afraid and turned his attention to seek the Lord, and proclaimed a fast throughout all Judah. So Judah gathered together to seek help from the Lord. They even came from all the cities of Judah to seek the Lord." I call this sermon, "The Tale of Two Kings, a Different Response." A tale of two kings, a different response. And pretty much the premise of the sermon is, instead of turning to things that are meant to destroy you in times of fear and distress, turn to God. Amen. Instead of turning to things that are meant to destroy you in times of fear and distress, turn to God. Resolve to turn to God. I know what some of you are probably saying. What? Duh. That's easy. That's obvious. I'm about to sit here for 20 minutes and listen to you just state the obvious. Well, it may seem simple to not turn to things that are meant to destroy you when you're fearful or when you have distress. Instead, you should resolve to seek the Lord. That may be obvious, but it's not a no-brainer. Because if you know, a couple weeks ago, something tragic happened in California. And I work in the news media, and so it is my job to keep up with the events that go on. We know that 14 people were murdered, and now we know that it was an act of terrorism. But we were kind of tracking how everybody was covering this story. And then, as I was preparing this message, I knew what I was preaching on. I looked on the internet, and it was actually in one of our shows too. The front cover of the New York Daily News. You guys may have seen it, but if we can get that on the screen, it really kind of drives home something. As you can see here from the Daily News, it says 14 dead in California mass shooting. God isn't fixing this. As latest batch of innocent Americans are left lying in pools of blood, cowards who could truly end gun scourge continue to hide behind meaningless platitudes. And all of that pretty much is an attack against when you say, my prayers are with. And the headline of the article, or the first sentence of the article read, prayers aren't working, period. Prayers aren't working, period. And as I looked at that, tears began to roll down my face, because I know that there are some people in this audience who you may never say that out loud, but truly you feel that way. You're facing issues, things that have happened in your life, and you say to yourself, God isn't fixing this. Prayers aren't working. And I cried because, yeah, we know most media outlets are secular. And yeah, we know we can't expect people who are not following God to act like us. But however, I asked the question, what happens when the people of God start believing that God can't fix it? What happens when the people of God, they may not say it, but deep down in their heart, they start believing that prayers aren't working? And I was saddened because the Bible answers the question of what happens when God's people take on that attitude. God can't fix this. Prayers don't work. And he answers it through the story of King Ahaz. If we go back to that, 2 Chronicles 28. And King Ahaz, let me just really set this up for you. The Israelite nation in the Old Testament, they're supposed to be God's people. They are God's called out children who God was going to use to bless the world. They were set apart. They had a law that they needed to follow. And we know that King David, he was one of their greatest kings, or their greatest king before Jesus, of course. And it describes King David as a man after his own heart, after God's own heart. So God had a great relationship with David, and he promised to bless him. So unfortunately, some of David's descendants did not follow God completely. And what happened was the kingdom that was supposed to be a united kingdom split. And the southern kingdom, because God's relationship with David, he loved David, he made sure that he kept his promise. That's one thing that you need to know about God. God keeps his promises. Amen. So even though David's descendants acted a fool, God kept his promise to David and said, I'm going to make sure that David's descendants still has a king on the throne. So that they split, and the kingdom of Judah is David's descendants. So here's King Ahaz, who is David's descendant, who is a king of the nation of Judah. And you can describe him pretty much in the first chapter, or 28, the first verse. Don't worry about getting that. And it just says, Ahaz was 20 years old when he became king, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem. And he did not do right in the sight of the Lord, as David his father had done. He did not do right in the sight of the Lord as David did. And because he did not do right, he had wars. He was constantly getting invaded the kingdom of Judah. And he was facing all types of trials and destruction and loss. So God allows that to happen to him to get him to turn back to God. But we see in 2 Chronicles 28:22, he had a different response.
Right.
It says, now in the time of his distress, this same King Ahaz became yet more unfaithful to the Lord. He became more unfaithful to the Lord. For he sacrificed to the gods of Damascus, which had defeated him, and said, because the gods of the kings of Aram help them, I will sacrifice to them that they may help me. But they became the downfall of him and all Israel. What we can learn from King Ahaz is that never turn to the destroyer for help.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
King Ahaz foolishly believed that which was set out to destroy him will bring him victory. And we can look and throw stones at him. But let's be honest. Don't we do the same thing?
Yeah.
Fear, anxiety, depression. We read in the word that it's meant to destroy us, right? But how come in times of trials we turn to fear, we turn to anxiety, we turn to distress as if they are going to help us? We fear failure, so we turn to fear and work harder. We work overtime while we neglect our spouses, our children, our church, and we wonder why our lives are being destroyed. We fear being alone, so we turn to a mate that is not a real mate. We give our bodies to them. We give our emotions to them because we're scared to be by ourselves. And then we're wondering why we are left empty. Because what happens is when you turn to fear and anxiety, when you turn to that which is meant to destroy you for help, it only increases the speed of your destruction. But I can't be hard on you guys. I really can't. Can't be hard on King Ahaz either. Because this month is, I always have to remember this month of December. Because about 12 years ago, that was me. I was a Christian. I love God. And I didn't know it at the time, but fear and distress were my idols. I would turn to fear and distress as if they were going to comfort me. And 12 years ago, this very month, fear and distress, acting as if it was my friend, tells me